Hi everyone, Nick Giles here again. I've got myth number 7 in my series of myth-busting property leasing in New South Wales. And today I want to talk a little bit about the subject of bond, more specifically the myth that many property managers and property people have heard around the country for a long time from landlords at a certain time of the lease where they say, look, that cost you're talking about, just take it from the tenant's bond. Well, sometimes that's true, but quite often it's not, and it shows a misunderstanding again about the purpose of bond in the lease and exactly the terms in which it can be used. It also goes back to the issue of things like wear and tear and the cause of specific issues in a property. But specifically with the use of bond, it's very clearly regulated in the Residential Tenancies Act in New South Wales. And clause number 41 in the Residential Tenancy Agreement and the three sub-clauses in that agreement look very specifically at when the bond is used and how it is to be applied at that time. The first of the sub-clauses there actually is the bond needs to be, or the use of the bond rather, needs to be accounted for. The third, so you need the amount of bond you're going to use. The second part of it is that you have to have evidence for exactly what that amount is, so quotes for works to be done or evidence in the accounts that that amount of money is owed. And the third and most critical part of all of this is that you have to have a completed condition report upon the property being vacated. A completed condition report. This is the critical thing when it comes to the usage of bond, particularly for works. Now, I'll talk about bond in relation to the rent in a second, but when you're talking about condition reporting, this is the critical factor. When an agent or a landlord, but particularly an agent, does a condition report at the start of the tenancy, one of the issues that emerges is there's an underestimating of the critical role of this document. Now, the entire stretch of the tenancy, notwithstanding routine inspections during the time the tenant's in place, the critical part of the issue here regarding use of bond specifically is the quality of this entry condition report. In other words, if something is not noted at the beginning of the tenancy, it doesn't really matter what happens to it during the tenancy because you cannot justifiably take the bond to deal with an issue that is not documented correctly, because you simply have to be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this issue exists. Now that comes down to photography, it comes down to written evidence, it comes down to video evidence, all sorts of different things, but more commonly photographic evidence. But in the end, the entry condition report has to be very, very thorough. And for landlords out there, I'd really make sure you're challenging your property managers on this. It has to be an incredibly thorough document with lots and lots of compensating issues there to make sure you're covering those points. And it's a very common matter of dispute at the end of a tenancy. A property manager will typically come back to this myth and say, well, look, Mr. Landlord, we can't really claim that because it's simply not... we don't have a paper trail that supports taking that money from the tenant. Now, just putting that to one side for a moment, it's really important as a landlord that you think about bond the right way. First of all, it's only 4 weeks of rent. 4 weeks of rent is not a tremendously large amount of money. So the way that this is designed to be is to be an amount which sits to the side, which always remains the tenant's money. It doesn't become your money as a landlord, it's always the tenant's money unless it needs to be used. So it's really designed to be taken at the start and returned at the end. It's really a goodwill gesture. That's sort of the way it's been designed in the law. That doesn't mean it can't be used. Of course it can be used. It's used every day. But the reality is a strong tenancy is one in which the bond is taken at the start and returned at the end. It's not really an amount that is designed to be used. It should really be a matter of the quality of the tenancy, and the way that's worked should be standing on its own outside of the bond. When it does get used, the successful times it's used really are when a property manager speaks to a tenant and says, look, do you think this would be better if I just looked after this for you so you can exit, you can move house and off you go? And they say, yep, no worries, Mr. Agent, if you could just take that amount out of the bond, that works for me. And that's pretty much how it would go back and forth. And that's equally a successful way of dealing with it. It's not really an amount designed to be used for rent. It's really there as a fail-safe. It's not there for us to think, well, as a landlord, I've got this money set to one side the tenant's given me that I can just use. It's not really the way it's designed to be operated on. This is why bond is taken by the rental bond board. It's taken and essentially stored away from the possession of the owner and the agent, and rightfully so. It's not our money, it's the tenant's money, and thankfully it's tightly regulated now. So the myth again, this issue of I'll just use the bond, just take the tenant's bond and you'll be right. It's really not the way to approach bond. Think about quality of tenancy first at all times when you're dealing with tenancy matters. If the bond needs to be used, let your agent guide you through that process and make sure it's followed to a T. Make sure those entry condition reports are as thorough as they possibly can be. Make sure you've got plenty of detail there so you can support any of those critical changes and go from there. Thanks guys, Myth 8 is coming soon.